Welcome everyone to another episode of Sunday Night Live. This is taped in advance. We have a very special guest with us tonight, somebody that I absolutely adore, and I know you will too. I want to thank those of you who are viewing. At this time, we won't have live comments in this one, as this has been pre-recorded. Please do leave your comments in the comment section, as we will do our very best to get back to each and every one of you. Special thanks go out to the Virtual Center for Theosophical Studies. You can find them on Facebook at Theosophical Studies, which is an online institute dedicated to the study of the esoteric teachings and principles, and also to the TSE in England, in London, England. If you would like a free copy of the Key to Theosophy and you live in the United Kingdom, please drop me a line at the email I'll include below in the links. And there are still some copies available, some hard copies. And if you'd like to start your journey, that's a great place to start. So you can see her sitting here with us right now. This is an incredible woman. Our lovely guest tonight is the one and only Esther Pockrandt from Maleny. Am I saying that correct? Maleny?
Maleny.
Maleny, Queensland, Australia. So we are in a big time difference. Our time zone is different. It is evening where she's at. It's morning where we are. Esther is a counselor, a psychotherapist, a teacher, and a facilitator. She's an artist, a permaculture gardener, a world traveler. She is a volunteer, still a failing ukulele player, but I think maybe we might I don't know, that's up for discussion. I'm not sure. I think that you probably are way better than you're telling us. And a perpetual student of life. I first met the lovely and gentle Esther through sharing Theosophical Shorts on Facebook. We were sharing things back and forth. And she was the one who reminded me brilliantly, and I've used this ever since, that we are all dedicated students of Theosophy, simply cross-pollinating and sharing. And she always used to use a little B in her comments back. And I thought, oh, it's brilliant. That's exactly what we're doing. And that is the whole point and purpose of what is done here on the Living Theosophy YouTube channel. It's to help unite all who work for and with the service of others to truly eliminate the dreaded us and them mentality and join together. We're here to join together, to walk the path together, each of us using our different strengths, weaknesses, experiences, and points of view. Esther has traveled widely, but she stresses not so much as a tourist, but as a stayer. She likes to call herself a stayer because she'll stay for a while. As a participant in host communities and having a deep interest in how different cultures and people experience life. And in return, to render some service. She also gives back. She recognizes the true value of the natural world. And we're going to talk about that in this episode. So stick around. The ocean, the night skies, from which she draws her inspiration, peace, and strength. Her motto is to live simply so that all may simply live. Still more to say, so stand by before we get to her. An early on self-taught yoga practitioner, a spiritual seeker at heart, Esther came to Theosophy late in life. Of all her exploration of what is truth, she found Theosophy to finally provide that much larger picture that she has been looking for, providing a matrix, again, providing a matrix, a blueprint for life. Esther says that Theosophy is simple, yet so profound, uncluttered and practical, science in spirit and spirit in science. Relevant for every age, every circumstance, providing that much needed perspective for all of us to not lose balance. Also, we sensitize the heightened awareness to the pain and suffering around us. And that's something that would resonate, I think, with any of you that's watching this channel. Again, I will repeat that. Also, we sensitize the heightened awareness of the pain and suffering around us and witness the many injustices on this planet. Theosophy is indeed the coming together once again of science that was revealed once so long ago in the mysteries, and it is the gift to humanity and life on this planet. Esther refers to herself as a traveler, a gypsy. So far, this has taken her to work and live in France with Australian Indigenous communities in far north Queensland, to work with refugees, the disadvantaged. She's lived in Japan, she's lived in Korea, and lastly, she's volunteered in India. And although Esther admits life has not always been a bed of roses, she's also finding herself, in hindsight, she adds, the embarrassing star in Blooperville. She says it is life's reminder of her perpetual student of life status, and that all important life essential, a good sense of humor, that is what matters, and that all is well. But her adventures are not over yet. They're not. And that her virtual toothbrush and backpack are always at the ready. So let us make the most of the hour we have together with her. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, the incredible Esther Pockrandt. Welcome, Esther. Welcome, sweetheart. The first slide. So whenever you're ready, sweetie, I'm just going to let you carry on, and then I just go for it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So I suppose this is a little bit also a snapshot of my journey, and that's why I've called it Theosophy, a Traveler's Roadmap. And the reason why I have that photo there is because I did a lot of cycle journeying while I lived in France and in England. And I may have actually cycled very close to where you are at the moment. So to start the talk, I've called it Bicycle Wisdom because I learned a lot on my bike. It taught me a good sense of humor because, you know, when you've got a flat tire, there's no use crying. You've got to laugh and see how you can get on with fixing it. So I was actually tossing up to whether to call this talk Theosophy, What My Bicycle Taught Me. Definitely lots of downs and then lots of ups in my journeys. But where the downs are actually the reverse of what one might think. When you get to the top of a hill, you realize it's just a prep to catch your breath as you then journey on, just a pit stop knowing full well there is another hill after this.
That's very wise.
But before you get to that other hill, there is a descent where you freewheel, you feel the wind in your hair, and it's a wonderful journey downhill. So you gather your breath to head down that hill, and as you do, you gather speed and ever gathering momentum as you head down. Not slacking off, however, and this was the other big lesson in all of that cycle journeying, because you start pedaling madly as you hit the bottom of that hill, and to make it up that next hill just a little bit further, and if it's very steep, not having to push quite as much as you would have if you'd just slacked off. So you also then realize that although your baggage does give you more downhill speed, that it actually drags you down for the next hill climb. Now that's an interesting lesson in itself, because when you think about it, in life, we do carry a lot of baggage with us, don't we? So yes, I did do a lot of bicycle touring, 3 months at a stretch while I lived in France, and you know, because you have those long summer holidays of 3 months. And so in those 3 months, I'd get wiser, lighter in my baggage. Yeah, and all the while reading Richard Adams' novels. And you see down here, Watership Down by Richard Adams. I don't know, have you met it, read it, heard about it?
I have certainly heard about it. I have not read it, though.
Oh, it's the most wonderful book if you can read it. I mean, I had a copy. I've carried it around with me, and I finally let it go. But I wish I hadn't, because it's an amazing tale, and written in 1972. And it brought the country lanes of England and France to life from a rabbit's perspective of us humans and our social constructs. And this rabbit tale reminded me very much of Plato's cave, actually, because
yeah.
it's about a colony of rabbits, and there is one that stands out and says, look, there's more to explore,
Yes.
and so on. I won't tell you more. I hope you get that book out, or anybody else.
Will, yes.
It's just really, really insightful in terms of society. And by the way, you would actually probably like Richard Adams, because he wrote another book called The Plague Dogs. And it's about a group of dogs that saved themselves from a research facility where they were mistreated. And their journeys afterwards. So what is lovely is to have us look at life, but from our furry friends' perspective, you know, which we often don't do.
Yes, I will look that up. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And this was in the mid-70s, of course. It wasn't long either before and in the late 1979 when Douglas Adams, now this is the Adams family, Richard Adams for Watership Down, but then of course there was the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, wasn't there? Yes. Which is a really silly tale that hitched and hiked its way through the world. And I was also fascinated by the Kung Fu movies, you know, those with David Carradine, where he, as Grasshopper, you know, sort of shares a lot of wisdom of the East. Towers. It's just beautiful. You know, I really still love watching those little segments.
Well, that would inspire. If that calls to you, that would almost probably feel familiar when you saw that there's a calmness, there's an inner something going on there that isn't just for entertainment's sake. He's speaking some truth there.
And also because Kung Fu was so much in the world for boys, you know, fighting. But really, Kung Fu is about, and I think that's a really important thing to take away, is not so much about fighting, it's about using somebody else's energy and reflecting it back to them. That's what the Kung Fu moves are about. So it's about deflecting and using somebody else's, not to aggress, but to send it back to them. And I thought that was a great metaphor for...
Beautifully put. I don't think that's a very commonly understood thing. I think that they see it as, like yoga, it's just simply postures. And exercise is far more to it than that. And Kung Fu, as you just said, again, if you would repeat that last sentence, that it is a reflection, to reflect the energy back. Can you repeat that, please?
Yes. A Kung Fu is in essence a deflection back of the sender's energy, so that you're actually not using your energy, but you're being so totally present so that you feel and know immediately where an energy is coming from, and you're able to deflect it back.
Wow,
so,
beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you too for seeing that. And of course, I was also enthralled by Lobsang Rampa's books. You know, that Tibetologist who really was a plumber from the Midwest in England, I think, but he had some really amazing insight into Tibetan monastic life and the essence of it, and that, although it was fiction, did inspire me. And I must acknowledge Michael Jelonic. He does feature in this PowerPoint a little bit. And also on this page I manage on Facebook for our particular lodge, because he really has such incredible wisdom, whether he likes it or not. I think he's a theosophist at heart, in how he reflects on life and so on. Yes, so he's Australian, and he gave an interview once, and I thought what he said was brilliant. He said, "The artist brings out what is repressed in society," and it sure is true in his work, and he gets a lot of inspiration and insights by being in nature. So I deeply respect him, and I hope if this ever airs, it will be seen in that light. And I do want to pay respect to many of our contemporary artists too, musicians and writers and presenters. The ancient wisdom has filtered through and has been seized for the new age. And even though much diluted, distorted and commercialized for profit, into an industry and rarely acknowledged for where the source actually is, it does, in the way the new age expresses it, it does show glimpses of the wisdom, but also in the most unexpected ways. And that's always a delight to see that. And you think, oh, that comes from Theosophy, really. And of course, now we all know, since Big Thought of The Hitchhiker's Guide, that the meaning of life is 42, and travel into the galaxy, quite distracting. So we can finish there, that's it. We know the answer to life.
No, wait, we've only done one slide. We can't finish.
I know. I did take a long time, didn't I?
No, it's okay. Just take your time. Let's keep going.
Anyway, I did allude early as to where it all started, and it did actually start, I shared that experience of me experiencing myself as a micro as well as a macrocosm, and actually came about because I spent a lot of time on my own as a child. In retrospect, I think it wasn't such a bad thing, because I would spend nights looking into the night sky and projecting myself into the stars, and thinking, wow, feeling that sense of insignificance in that bigger, larger scheme of things. And it actually got me into yoga when I was 14 or 15. And I read a little bit of the yoga philosophy. And so that led me to explore it further. And also I was fascinated with the stories of Atlantis and Lemuria, and I studied Latin as a result, and got really into, the stories of Pompeii and Vesuvius and all these things in Europe, and got fascinated with the interconnectedness of things, like Sanskrit being the precursor of the Indo-European languages. And so, my love for languages really started to bloom. And shy as I was, I then threw myself into teaching to overcome this debility, and led me to introduce yoga as an alternative sport in high school, because I saw, and I really felt for mainly girls, sitting out competitive sports, because I was the same as a teenager. I just did not want to participate in competitive stuff. And so I had a wonderful principal, actually, who in the 70s allowed me to have yoga in school. And so I introduced the students to the idea of this interconnectedness of prana, of this precious life force as they breathed each breath, with total awareness of the ocean tides too, breathing in the same way, and just sort of feeling that connection between our human bodies and nature all around us. I also encouraged them to gaze into the night sky, as I did, and whenever they felt lost or alone, and feel themselves as absolutely wonderful and essential beings, vibrational beings, as I had also done in my teens. And so when I finally found Theosophy, after many meanderings that I also talked about, and finally this disillusionment with the world, disillusion with my firm belief that if we focused positively enough, surely change would happen. And we all know that it just doesn't quite work that way. And so the rainforests continue to be destroyed for meat and roads, because, the meat industry is responsible for a lot of destruction in the Amazon.
Gosh, yes.
9/11 created an even greater divide of them and us. And I broke. So I actually stopped counselling then, because I actually felt I had nothing to offer to people, because I myself felt it was all screwed. And there
After
was no
9/11?
hope.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so because it created that greater divide even amongst my counselling clients,
Oh, yeah.
brought out all their trauma and, you know, the them and us kind of
Mhm.
mentality.
Yes. Yes.
So when I did walk into that study group by accident, well, we all know there's no accidents, but that study group of Theosophy, that same feeling of profound depth and purpose that had dropped into my being when I was a teenager, so long ago, stargazing, and that had been my leitmotif for living all those years. I'm now talking 90s. And felt so totally lost, were finally validated again, and I reconnected, because what they were studying was just that, the micro and the macrocosm.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the whole essence, which is theosophy, which is cyclicity, that there's more beyond our little lives here on earth, that there are universes and lives and karma and pralayas and manvantaras and so much more. And I started to get hooked into theosophy. So, next slide. And this is where the realization that all my searches, you know, going through Krishnamurti and Steiner and Lobsang and, you know, the Adams family of writers that were part of my cycling journey, Zen, Vipassana, all those Indian gurus and Paramahamsas,
Yes, yes.
Buddhism, were definitely not a waste of time, because even though I moved from one to another, like a butterfly or a bee taking nectar, it was all ultimately nectar when brought into the hive. All these different spiritual expressions, teachings, all in essence just pollen and nectar offerings to be digested and made into honey.
Oh.
And I think this is the key, really. And I really think this is why, you know, I like to sign off with the bee and the flower.
I love it.
Because to me, and that's why I call it Madhu wisdom, because did you know that Madhu is actually a Sanskrit word? I've written something up in my notes here about that. And it's an incredible metaphor, really. And honey is found in Egyptian tombs, and it never goes off.
Really? I did not know that.
No, it doesn't go off.
Wow.
And pharaohs were buried with it. And the Sanskrit word for honey is madhu. And as Sanskrit is the mother of Indo-European languages,
yes,
therefore is etymologically identical to the Greek metu and the Anglo-Saxon medu or mead.
Oh, okay.
Now, isn't that interesting?
Wow. Yes, it's beautiful.
Sanskrit all the way to England to be calling this wine made from honey mead, coming from the Sanskrit word. And I find languages fascinating for this. And if one looks deeply, they embed many deeper teachings and words, really. And this becomes really true when you study kanji, you know, Chinese script, or all those languages that use that don't use Romanized script the way we do, you know. So, and as an aside, when you think about what humans do, and especially in this commercial, globally marketed world, robbing bees of this sustaining fluid and swap it for refined sugar or some other sweet substitute, it's just horrendous. And our bees are in serious crisis
we have to pay attention to what we're doing.
Their own health.
Yeah, we must overcome ourselves. This can't continue. We must look at the bigger picture. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And also, I think as vegetarians, we're often unaware using honey that it actually is robbing honeys of their sustaining.
True. It's not
food.
vegetarian, it's not vegan. A lot of people don't know that. Well, I don't say a lot of people don't know that, but some of my meat eating friends assume that honey is, and silk too,
Yes,
are products that if it causes any suffering, then we don't ingest it. So yes, thank you for pointing that out. And what a beautiful, I did not know about the etymology back to mead. What is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and I do think that's another very important spiritual metaphor in itself, because what we humans have too often a tendency to do is robbing the essence of anything, refining it, or even replacing it with an inferior substitute and selling the product for an exorbitant price.
Yeah, we think it's all about us. We were very selfish, ignorant, superstitious, and greedy.
Even in spiritual matters.
Yes.
And I think much of the new age is sadly guilty of that.
Yes.
It has become an industry. Some call it, in my opinion, rightly so, spiritual consumerism. I mean, look at all the crystals.
Yeah, but it does, like you said, it does go back to these ancient wisdoms that belong to all and solely to none. If you want to find the source, it's free.
Yes.
You can't pay to have your karma removed. You can't pay to become enlightened. It's a self-application journey. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this particular episode and all the episodes. We're sharing these teachings so you can have access, because they're not about us. It's about you. So that's why we're doing this. We're teaching.
And becoming more aware, actually more aware of what is the gold and what is just refined, repackaged. And what I find refreshing in Theosophy is that it's still not packaged and that everything is offered at cost. It's not commercialized. You promote those diploma courses, but they're all offered at cost, because things do cost. Then it's nothing free in the world, and it's a wonderful service to uplift humanity.
It is difficult too, because I remember, even during a talk there, they have to keep the lights on. They've got to put the coffee on the table. So I understand that there are costs of operation, but the teaching should always remain available to all. That's why I try to get them out free, whether it be an ebook or whatever. Just point them towards the teachings or voice them up here so they're free, available on YouTube. They're free and available to all. The application, the work is done within yourself, as you know. For those of you who are viewing and wondering where this is, it's not a guru that you're going to follow. It's you. It's inside you.
Yeah, that's so true. So I do want to get into what Theosophy actually does offer. And, many people promote the secret doctrine, and it sure is an incredible piece of work that Helena Petrovna Blavatsky left us. But I was most impressed by a little book, and I've got a bibliography at the end of this PowerPoint of what I think are perhaps some really important little books that people could start with.
Oh, thank you.
So I wanted to actually read a quote, and I haven't got a slide for that.
Okay.
From the Foundations of Esoteric Philosophy, which Ianthe H. Hoskins put together, of the essence of the secret doctrine. And it's recommended as a start because the secret doctrine itself is huge. I was just looking for the book. Oh, here it is. It's actually, if you can look at it, it's very small compared to the secret doctrine. And you'll see this in mirror view, so you can't actually read it. But this is the book, and I'm just wanting to quote from it because at the back of it, Commander Robert Brown, it's called the Bowen Notes, because he studied with HBB in 1890, HBB being Helena Petrovna Blavatsky in 1891. And just 3 weeks before her death, she highlights her caution and advice for studying the secret doctrine. You know, a lot of people think, yes, we must get into that. But she says, reading the secret doctrine page by page as one reads any other book will only end in confusion. And she adds, it is worse than useless going to those whom we imagine to be advanced students and asking them to give us an interpretation of the secret doctrine. They cannot do it. If they try, all they give are cut and dried exoteric renderings which do not remotely resemble the truth. And of course, truth is in capital letters. And why I'm reading this out is because, you know, it's so easy for people to be turned off. And it's so easy for people to go into just taking things word for word, when in fact that wasn't what she intended with that. And she continues, you know, and people get hung up on, so somebody said this and somebody said, and this is the way it is, holding on to labels, holding on to doctrine, holding on to teachings, when in fact she says to accept such interpretations of others means anchoring ourselves to fixed ideas. Whereas truth lies beyond any ideas we can formulate to or express. Exoteric interpretations are all very well, and she adds, she does not condemn them, so long as they are taken as pointers for beginners and are not accepted by them as anything more.
Okay,
Continues. Yeah, I think this is so important to remember. You know, I think a lot of people get caught up in labeling, using astrology in order to box people into, you know, astrological
labels. Yeah, I understand.
Labels, explanations, or into Myers-Briggs extrovert, introvert tendencies, and looking at the world through these classification systems. And yet that is not what we are meant to be doing. And as she says, it's just pointers and may be helpful for the beginner, but we must not get stuck in that. Well, and many persons, she laments, who are in and or who will in the future be in the TS are, of course, potentially incapable of any advance beyond the range of a common exoteric conception. And I think it's probably a good thing to remember too. But there are and will be others, and for them she sets out the following, which are what we're going to see in the next slide.
Okay.
And the first thing to do, she says, even if it takes years, is to get some grasp of the three fundamental principles given in the proem, and the four fundamental ideas. She also advised to come to the secret doctrine without any hope of getting the final truth of existence from it.
The final truth, because there's still more to come, yes?
That's it. And it is just a finger.
Yes, yes.
Pointing.
They have said that this is just some of it. There's still so much more. And this is science, this is philosophy, this is spirituality, this is metaphysics. This is coming through Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, not from her, through her. She's one of many. And what Esther is talking about, though, we will include links to the things that she's talking about. But if you are a beginner, you just begin somewhere, possibly with what she had recommended earlier, or whatever you wish for me to put in as links. I'm happy to link them to back to those books as well. So she furthermore advised that when we study the secret doctrine, to see it as just a means towards the truth, but not as the truth. And to see in study the means of exercising and developing the mind
never touched by other studies, and to follow the rules no matter what we may study in the secret doctrine, to let the mind hold fast as the basis of ideation the four fundamental ideas. And now we move to the next slide, where we start and look at the four basic ideas that she proposes in the secret doctrine. And they are, and this is what hooked me, the fundamental unity of all existence, where existence is one thing, not a collection of things linked together. I think this is so essential, not a collection of things linked together, indivisible into parts, without comparison, and is therefore absolute. This fundamental unity of all existence is one thing, yet it has two aspects: positive consciousness and negative substance, by which consciousness expresses itself, where the atom, the human, the God are each separately as well as collectively absolute being, their real individuality. And the advice to heed is that the moment one lets go of this fundamental idea, the idea of separation supervenes, and the study loses its value.
Brilliant. Thank you. That is actually what we are looking at right now. The cause of most of our suffering, just to interject, is that we believe that we are separate from one another. And that quote and everything else, that quote was invaluable. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
And the second basic idea is there is no dead matter, as every atom is itself fundamentally absolute being. Therefore, too, there are no spaces of ether or akasha, those commonly promoted supposed playgrounds for angels and elementals. And I think this is really quite interesting, because in the New Age, there is a lot of play with angels in the natural world. And not saying that, as she said at the beginning in the advice of how to study this, not that we need to have opinions about this, but just to check it out, to meditate on it, to contemplate this, to observe nature and see what comes up. And the true idea shows every atom of substance, no matter of what plane, whether it be mineral, rock, mountain, plant, animal, or us as human beings, in itself is alive. The third basic idea is man is the microcosm. And that excited me so much when I felt that, even though in truth there cannot be a micro or macrocosm, as there is but one existence. That's profound, isn't it?
That is, because we think that and there, or here and there. It's here, all one. Very well said. Keep going.
Because great and small exist only when viewed with a limited consciousness. And the fourth basic idea, as above, so below, that great hermetic axiom, which sums up all the others. As is the inner, so is the outer. As is the great, so is the small. As it is above, so it is below. Yet there is but one life and law. So we come back to the basic idea of number one, the basic idea number one. There is no separation. There is no inner, no outer. It's almost like a Zen koan, isn't it?
Yes.
There is no separation. There is no inner, no outer, no great or small, no high or low in the divine economy. and I know people will pick up the divine. I always spell it with an E, divine. I guess it comes from the French and Old English, and it's
Beautiful.
sort of been lost. So, and the problem with such a realization, however, and heightened sensitivity with such an experience of oneness, of as above, so below, of all is alive, and that shared responsibility and pain that comes with that, yet not being felt by others, obviously, when we see all the destruction around us, is this deep sense of loss, of despair and hopelessness and helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
And no wonder so many empaths
Yes.
who feel this interconnectedness take to drugs, alcohol, dropping out from the mainstream, retreating into community bubbles. You know, there was this big move to move into communities, to drop out of society, no longer having the heart to watch the news. And the other danger is, of course, spiritual escapism, retreating into spiritual movements, devotional chanting, separating out from the masses, or getting stuck in head learning. And in my life, I always felt change happens from within, not from within us only, but by working within corporations, within society, within organizations. How else can change happen? Otherwise, it becomes top down.
Well, for the empaths that are coming in, they want to change the world. But I always advise, take a look at Theosophy and change yourself.
That's it.
And it's very difficult, though, especially as an empath. I believe you have an empathic nature as well. It's difficult. The world is a very painful place. So.
Yeah, it becomes very painful when we see the rubbish and the plastic, and, you know, we see orangutans that are fighting bulldozers. You know, it's just heartbreaking, really heartbreaking when we look outside our tent, you know, outside of our little bubbles. It's just a metaphor, that little bicycle there. And then we see the world in a totally different light, but with painful eyes. And so no wonder people don't want to know. It is hard to see all of that. But is ignorance really bliss? But are we really powerless to do anything about this? And you mentioned that, Anne. No, we're actually not, because the change has to happen from within. After all, we just read in the previous slides, can there be a them and us? Actually, can there be? Yet the danger is, when we are empaths, that we feel disempowered and see them out there doing all the destruction, and that we are victims.
We are not victims, yeah.
But we're not victims.
No, we're not.
And do we really need a new system? Would it change anything? Again, a system is something that's outside. You know, a new system doesn't really change anything. And as the saying goes, if you pour stale wine into new bottles, you still have stale wine.
That's true.
Something else more basic has to shift, making new wine with other ingredients, perhaps.
Amen to that. That's true. I've never heard that.
Or drinking perhaps pure water, you know, instead. So
that's very well said.
So it's hard not to feel angry, despair, and depression. And I mean, we mustn't also look down on people who do feel that and see them as having not found the truth. But it is, you know, we must see that with compassion. And, you know, I've been there.
Mm-hmm. I as well. Yes.
But we also do know that when we are depressed and feeling anger or despair, all these emotions, we are actually of no use to anyone. And when I asked a Buddhist nun some years ago how one cannot feel such emotions, her answer was, it's a waste of precious energy being depressed. Instead of worrying about what is happening in another land, do what you can in your own community. Mm-hmm. Every little awareness and change adds to the big picture. Mm-hmm. And I was reminded of that environmental slogan of the 70s, act locally.
Yeah.
Think globally.
Yeah.
And that is so true. When we think about where we place our dollars, what we consume, and think about the chain of production and who's at the end of that chain. I think about quinoa. You know, quinoa, that new protein product that's become a health fad.
The grain? Yeah.
Yes, the grain. It's actually from America, from indigenous cultures.
Oh,
Before we discovered it. And since we discovered it, because of the export dollar, they can no longer consume it to stay in their own lives. And they're eating colleagues cornflakes instead. Isn't that shocking? And getting so unhealthy. So when you see quinoa from Bolivia, we need to think about that. And that's why I think it's so important to look at the food chain. The chain of
production. See where it's coming from. It's not just magically appearing on the shelves. There's a lot more to the story. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's where many people on spiritual journeys get unstuck, is this depression after, being really aware of the interconnectedness of all things. Yes, so the other thing that then inspired me is, we've done the 3 objects in the Theosophical Society, which are, when you really look at it, they are 3 verbs, action verbs. Verbs are action. So to form a nucleus, to encourage the study, to investigate. So within all of that, there's no doctrine.
That's right.
It's all about us forming.
All about you. It's true. I mean, I'm not talking to you, Esther. I mean, I am.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I'm looking to anyone who's viewing this. This is, like she said, no doctrine. There's the secret doctrine, but there is no dogma. There is no absolute have to. This is a journey of self. So this is all about you. Please pay attention to what is being said here. It has changed our lives, and hopefully it will change yours too. This is not a religion. This is not some kind of practice or anything you can join. This is a journey of self. Please listen and heed.
And so I think that's very powerful to take on board, that although there are 3 objects, there's no rules, regulations. The only thing that we are asked to adhere to is actually what I call, instead of the freedom of speech, is brotherhood. In practice.
Yes.
Because when we exercise the freedom of speech, we're actually, it is thought desirable. This is another thing, it's not a rule, but it is thought desirable to emphasize the fact that there is no doctrine, no opinion by whomsoever taught or held that is in any way binding on any member, none which any member is not free to accept or reject. Approval of its 3 objects is the sole condition of membership. But if we exercise freedom of speech, really, we need respect of the other, and we need the ability to actually listen, really listen with open ears, without any beliefs, without any categories, without any labels, preconceived ideas of what the truth is. Truly listen to the heart of what somebody's saying, even if we disagree. Maybe we can find a common denominator, and to me, that is brotherhood and sisterhood, without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color, actually in action.
Look for the commonalities, look for your similarities, agree to disagree, say you understand that they have a different opinion, and it's perfectly okay to still love each other.
And maybe there is a common ground where we can connect.
I believe that there is, if we only look for it. I do believe that.
Yes, yeah. And I will just read this thing that just jumped out at me, is that Radha Bernier says in her book, Human Regeneration, brotherhood is a reflection in action of right perception. And what I find really interesting there is that we often sort of think, like, if we are on a spiritual path, then really it's all about meditation and positive thinking and so on. But actually, brotherhood does require action, but only when we have the right perception of unity, not of a them and us. And the moment we have that feeling of them and us, then we have not the right perception to actually move into action, because we will be adding to separation.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really, really a powerful thing.
Thank you for
profound. And she does say that, you know, to read the teachings, the secret doctrine, or anything, this is Radha Bernier saying that, we need time to reflect.
Yes, yeah.
So rather than read one page after another and say, you know, I've read it, I know what brotherhood is. We need to contemplate it, you know, we need to meditate on it. And we need to perhaps just take one word and meditate on it maybe for a week and tease it out in all its elements. And I think these three objects and the freedom of speech are a meditation and a contemplation in themselves, in observing ourselves. Where the interesting thing is too that the first object is to form a nucleus of universal brotherhood. Yet most people come to the society because they want to investigate the latent powers in the human, which is only the third object. Yet, if we do observe the natural law, which is brotherhood, kinship with all life, then we understand.
And put into application these teachings as you study them or come across them, to study, meditate, and put them into action in your own life. Put them into application during times of great trial and trauma and drama or suffering. If you're looking to feel better, if you're looking to overcome whatever situation it is, or even yourself, once you finally get there, these teachings, when put into application, can and will change your life. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so is Theosophy the terrain? It is certainly fresh, non-ritualistic, non-anthropomorphized in its view, which means there is no God. There's nothing that is man-like in depiction. It's an energy, it's a force. It provides a clear blueprint for living and meaning making of life, and within the bigger cosmic context, as we've just sort of had a taste of. These are just tastes. The self-referral, mastery and responsibility is attractive. Within that context, there's no external force that gives forgiveness. There is no heaven or hell. There's no punishment or reward for being a good person, except for what we create ourselves.
That's true.
There is, as I touched earlier, the generosity with which all these wisdoms were shared or are shared for anyone wanting to explore them further or go deeper. It certainly offers that, Theosophy does. So to go to the next slide, we're reminded that all these things, as I started reading from the bio notes, are just fingers pointing. And Thich Nhat Hanh, who I love, I first met him when I read his book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. It's just a wonderful little book. He says, because the teaching, bhikkhus means students, the teaching is merely a vehicle to describe the truth. Don't mistake it for the truth itself. A finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. The finger is needed to know where to look for the moon. But if you mistake the finger for the moon, the teaching is like a raft that carries you to the other shore. The raft is needed, but the raft is not the other shore. An intelligent person would not carry the raft around on his head after making it across.
Oh, so refreshing to hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
And Helena Blavatsky says, there is a road, which is, there is a raft you can carry, steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind, but yet a road, and it leads to the very heart of the universe. I can tell you how to find those who will show you the secret gateway that opens inward only. It opens inward only and closes fast behind forevermore. And it is true, once you've touched some of this and it has impregnated your inner being, you can't go back to not feeling anymore, for example. There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot conquer. And of course, it takes a lot of courage to walk this path. And many people do shy away from it because it isn't an easy road. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. There is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount. And for those who went onwards, there is reward, past or telling, the power to bless and save humanity. And I think that's the key. We must walk that path. It is a hard path. But once we go inward and really explore the power to bless and save humanity is the reward. I find that beautiful for those who fail. And I always laugh at this one because I feel I'm so imperfect. There are other lives in which success may come. So therefore, don't give up hope. We have plenty of opportunities beyond this lifetime.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. And it is,
go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you know, this is interesting because it comes from an unpublished manuscript that was found after HPB's death. And I've got a note here on Lucifer. You know, a lot of people balk at Lucifer, you know, because it's been adopted by the church as meaning the devil.
Of course, yes.
Yes, I just want to say that Lucifer actually is the Latin word for morning star. And that's why I love languages, because it gives other depths, you know, of words we take for granted. Or as an adjective, as light bringing, corresponding to the Greek name Hoshposh, dawn bringer, is the Latin name for the planet Venus also, in its morning appearance, and is often used for mythological and religious figures associated with the planet. Like much of Theosophy, when taken out of context, creating much misunderstanding, and this is another one, Lucifer, and as is also that very sacred Hindu symbol that the Nazis misused, the swastika. And, you know, I myself, when I first saw that symbol of German heritage, of course, I was taken aback, you know, in other Indian spiritual traditions as well. So when we do look towards Theosophy and ask those questions, why wars, atrocities, and look towards Theosophy for answers, we're confronted with this statement, the theosophical view of the misery in the world, our planet, putting our own selves back into this picture. When we read from Light on the Path, which is a booklet by Mabel Collins.
Tiny, but very, very powerful. Tiny.
A very powerful little book. The Three Truths, which are at the end of fragment 1. Each man is his own absolute lawgiver. It's hard to take that one, isn't it? Because we like to look outside for they are responsible. It's not me,
easier
it's
that
them.
way. Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it, when you've got a finger pointing forwards, there's 3 pointing backwards always.
True.
So each man is his own absolute lawgiver, the dispenser of glory or gloom to himself, the decreer of his life, his reward, his punishment. Yet we must, when we read that, also when we look at the world, not to start judging, you know, and say, well, it's their karma, it's nothing to do with me, it doesn't concern me, it's them, it's, you know, us, unfortunate, doesn't matter. And we don't really want to know the bigger picture view, do we?
I just wanted to go back and to say anyone who is coming in on the 2 slides back, when you hear her speak of Lucifer, you will see that come up in the Theosophical teachings. Yes, the morning star, the bringer of light. Yes, the church would be upset with that, because to shine the light in the darkness of the churches, which is control and greed and oppression for so many centuries, Lucifer is not synonymous with Satan. I want to emphasize that. And the planet on which we are living is a place of great, great suffering. So what you have been told Lucifer is, what we have been told Lucifer is, previous to understanding in the Theosophical teachings, it is, as she mentioned, as Esther was talking about, the planet Venus, and it has to do with the bringer and the usher of light. I just wanted to clarify that before we moved on to, looks like Jonathan is our next slide.
And I really like this slide, because I think this little cartoon, because it is where, you know, humanity, because we are humanity, we're very easily distracted with. So the question is by one seagull, where do you think we're headed? I was going to get some fries on the pier. No, I mean big picture. What is the culminating result of consciousness? Where does this path end? I still feel like it has something to do with those fries on the pier. So we have here, from the key to Theosophy, Theosophist being Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, having a dialogue with an inquirer. And so the Theosophist says, we must not lose sight of the fact that every atom is subject to the general law governing the whole body to which it belongs. And here we come upon the wider track of the karmic law. Do you not perceive that the aggregate of individual karma becomes that of the nation to which those individuals belong, and further, that the sum total of national karma is that of the world? It's a hard one, that one.
Mm-hmm.
The evils that you speak of are not peculiar to the individual or even to the nation. They are more or less universal. And it is upon this broad line of human interdependence that the law of karma finds its legitimate and equable issue.
Mm-hmm.
So the inquirer then says, do I then understand that the law of karma is not necessarily an individual law? That is just what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And Jiddu Krishnamurti points to man's tendency for image making and groupings and more, and the blind following of these as the cause for such suffering and disharmony. And I think we need to reflect, when we look at what we see in the world, what is it that blinds us? And he says in a speech, that 1980 speech, truth is a pathless land. Man has built in himself images as a fence of security, religious, political, personal. These manifest as symbols, ideas, beliefs. The burden of these images dominates man's thinking, his relationships, and his life. These images are the causes of our problems, for they divide man from man.
Yes, they do.
And I do recall the 1972 book by Sheldon Kopp, which had the title, When You Meet the Buddha, Kill Him. Did you ever come across that one?
No, I didn't. I would definitely remember that. I did not, and have not.
Meaning that even when we think we've found the path, the guru to which we are totally devoted, we need to ultimately accept the responsibility that grows with freedom. No meaning that comes from outside of ourselves is real.
That's true.
Man cannot come to it through any organization. And I do not like to call myself a theosophist.
I understand.
because that in itself is a label.
I understand.
I'm
Yes.
just a human being on a exploring life the best I can. And any ism or ist is an organization. I really like Krishnamurti because he keeps on holding that up to us.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I think the danger is that we lock ourselves into a system, into a label.
Yeah, labels can be very limiting. That's why I always call myself a student of Theosophy. That's all.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all we are. And he continues in that speech, freedom is found in the choiceless awareness of our daily existence and activity. And that's really profound.
Mm-hmm.
As we observe ourselves and witness our thought patterns, we realize we are actually not being totally present in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
We then begin to discover the lack of freedom we actually do have. We are trapped, in fact, in our mind patterns, flipping instantaneously from past to present and back again, analyzing, judging, labeling, categorizing, story making, making assumptions, totally not or no longer with what is before us. No longer listening, but mind chatting with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they do say listening is the biggest service we can render in this world.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, truly listening. Yes, not thinking about what you're going to say next, not regurgitating what was just said, but truly giving of self and listening. We all could be better at that.
And this very mind chatter is the opposite of freedom. It is what creates division rather than unifying. Yet when we realize this pattern as the witnesser of the thinker, we are actually on the road to true freedom, the choiceless awareness of our daily lives. The very first yet most important step in living theosophy, the goal of yoga to quieten the modifications of the mind. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha.
Oh, it's beautiful. Will you say that again, please?
Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, in my poor interpretation of Sanskrit.
I think it's brilliant. Thank you.
But I do love the Yoga Sutras. I do think that they are so valuable in highlighting what our mind does.
Gorgeous. Thank you. Thank you.
So again, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, to quieten the disturbances of the mind, is really what meditation is about. Oh. The beginning of wisdom, which is the understanding of one's own mind and heart. And again, Jiddu Krishnamurti said that in the Book of Life. And on the left, we see the 7 Principles of Man by H.P. Blavatsky. And if you do look at it, although it is a star with stars within stars, it is what she depicts as the 7-fold nature of the human, the septenary nature of the human, which in itself is such a brilliant study, because to me, I'm a pictorial person, an image speaks 1,000 words to me. And when I compare the chakra picture there with the explanation of the 7 bodies of the human, the septenary nature of man, where the lower part, the bottom triangle, is related to our physical existence, and the upper triangle is where we're moving upwards in our consciousness. And that middle part is the connecting part between the two. And we flip, and we heard Krishnamurti go backwards and forwards constantly from the physical, the material, in our thoughts and our being, in our way we present in life, what we grasp for. In Buddhism, they have a wonderful saying, the hungry ghosts, always wanting, grasping, wanting to accumulate. And to move from the desire nature, which is the karma nature of the body, karma being desire, to the higher mind states, the Buddhic levels of connecting with soul, with the bigger picture of things, the unity of things, because everything in the lower triad meaning triangle, really relates to the material world, the manvantaric existence we have, which is our physical experience of life. So, and for me, it's a profound understanding of, a lot of people say, oh, I can't meditate, I prefer to walk in nature, that's where I meditate. But that's not actually meditation, because we're still doing something. We're occupying, distracting the mind. But to understand truly our process of meditation, of why we get so frustrated in our thoughts, is because we are in our physical nature. Mm-hmm. And just to understand that and explore that further, I really recommend it to anybody, because it gives insights into the meaning of life. It points to self-knowledge, the workings of our mind, where being the change must start. So understanding this, that study, I really recommend that. It's profound. Yeah. So again, beware of stale wine in new bottles. We maintain that all pain and suffering are results of want of harmony. And that the only terrible and only cause of the disturbances of harmony is selfishness, that lower triad, the hungry ghosts, in some form or other. Hence, karma gives back to every man the actual consequences of his own actions, without any regard to their moral character. But since he receives his due for all, it is obvious that he will be made to atone for all sufferings which he has caused, just as he will reap in joy and gladness the fruits of all the happiness and harmony he had helped to produce. And that's in the Key to Theosophy by Helena Blavatsky. Now, again, we must be careful not to get into judgment here, and seeing the big picture of it all as well, and that karma is something that goes back to past lifetimes too. Maybe there's a debt we need to pay, and therefore to resist or to be angry or to pity ourselves, feel a victim, that's useless. I think sometimes when things are tough, we need to accept it comes from somewhere, maybe not even in this lifetime, maybe from who knows when, but it's a debt that needs to be paid. And the best way we can deal with that is not to add more karma, energy, bad energy, and that is by acceptance and doing the best we can to, right it.
The balance, the ultimate law of balance, and what a harmony keeper it would be, how it would keep us all in line if we only understood that as ye sow, so shall ye reap is not just advice, it's truth.
Yeah, and so there is no heaven and hell because we created here on this earth ourselves.
Yeah, that's true. And it's absolutely horrifying the more you learn to understand that. And I think it's horrifying, insightful, and it's also helpful. But if you're here and you're just watching these teachings for the first time and you want to know more, there will be links down below so you can look into the text that Esther's been talking about. You can understand as well, because it isn't about Esther. It isn't about me. It's about you. These teachings are about you.
Just sharing what's been meaningful, made sense. Yeah. That's all, perhaps for somebody else to explore and see how it meaning makes for them.
Yes.
And I do really like this, though, that, a lot of people ask, well, if I do a lot of good things, beware the do-gooder in service, because these are the pitfalls, because a lot of people think, well, I can sort of get rid of my past or bad karma by being good, doing good things. But HBB, Mabel Collins, in Light of the Path, says, and by the way, that Mabel Collins was the co-editor of the magazine Lucifer with H.P. Blavatsky, she says, he who desires to form good karma will meet with many confusions, and in the effort to sow rich seed for his own harvesting, may plant 1,000 weeds, and among them the giant. Desire to sow no seed for your own harvesting. Oh, sorry, I'll read that again. Desire to sow no seed for your own harvesting. Desire only to sow that seed, the fruit of which shall feed the world. You, as a part of the world, in giving it food, you feed yourself. Yet even this thought, there lurks a great danger, which starts forward and faces the disciple or the student. While in his innermost soul he has perceived only evil, that is, he has thought himself to be intending great benefit to the world, while all the time he has unconsciously embraced the thought of karma, and the great benefit he works for is for himself. Mm-hmm. That's a good little check, isn't it? Why am I doing this? Why am I counseling?
Yeah, that's true.
Why am I teaching?
Yeah.
What is it?
I mean, you if you're doing it for selfish reasons, the work, Theosophy should be selfless, for the best interest of all, and to help ease the unnecessary suffering of all beings on this planet. That's my understanding. And if you're doing it so you can reap the benefits, then it will actually backfire on you. There is no cheating. There is no shortcut. And Light on the Path, again, a very tiny text. If you'd like a free copy of this, I will include that in the links. It's teeny. If you want to start, this was my first theosophical text. Originally it was the Ramachraka books that led me to this. Look how small it is. Every time I open it, something new comes out. If you'd like to take a look at this book, a free PDF is available for you in the links below. Thank you very much.
It's profound. It's
really ridiculously
profound.
profound. It's like a pamphlet that is a library of libraries that leads to so much more. So there's more where that came from. If you'd like to learn more, please follow and listen to your inner voice and click on the links. There's nothing, you don't have to pay anything. It's all free, and you do the application yourself. So thank you, Esther. You can carry on. There you go.
The simple realization from the study of Theosophy then is nothing one alive beingness in all its manifestations, interconnected and totally inclusive of all, yet seen previously as separate, is then literally life-changing. It's true. How we then show up in life and relate has the potential to change the world to one of peace and sharing, just as all organs of our bodies do naturally, unconditionally, in total service, work together and in balance for the well-being and benefit of the whole, without expectation for reward nor fear of punishment. I think, to me that rings so, it's real. A utopian view or based in science?
To hear it explained like that, it's the as above, so below. If I mean, that's true. The feet don't fight with the hands. The lungs don't fight with the intestines. We're all carrying on for the greater good of the whole, of all. We do see that this is not separate, because we can see the skin that encompasses also alive. What a beautiful way to look at that we are all interconnected and all inclusive. That includes even those that we greatly disagree with or find fault with, or those who find fault with us. That includes everything, all of us.
We're all the same. We're all, in essence, interconnected.
We are.
And perhaps expressions of ourselves that we shove under the carpet,
Yes, yes.
And I remember Krishnamurti having this, it's a book that that's been compiled, because all of the books are just compilations of his talks. He never wrote anything, but he has a book called The Choiceless Choice. If we are truly in service, we don't plan to, we just see a need and we go to helping. It's choiceless. We don't premeditate it. If somebody falls, you don't think, should I go over, and what if
Oh, yes. Yeah.
what are other people going to say? You just go and help and pick, or if somebody drops something. So yes, beware of spiritual escapism, apathy, and other addictions. And I think that's something. I love this little cartoon. It says, along with antimatter and dark matter, this is a science lesson, we've recently discovered the existence of doesn't matter, which appears to have no effect on the universe whatsoever. So, I thought that was applicable.
I love their little heads. That's great. That's perfect.
But, and of course, the other escape is into, all is wonderful and terrific, and it doesn't concern me kind of. Well, it's part of apathy, isn't it? Well, it's an escape because, the world...
it can't be daylight all the time. There's night as there is day. And addiction, absolutely, as an empath, the self-destruction, that's a very common path. But yes, and I believe there are empaths that are looking towards Theosophy for a solution. I believe this is where you need to find your answers. This is where
absolutely.
So there's many of them coming in wanting to change the world, and I try to tag them in these. I think this will help a great deal if you look into these teachings, if you relate to being an empath.
And again, Theosophy's primary object is universal brotherhood, or kinship with all life. And this shows us, when we understand this in the core of our being, by organic assimilation, how to live to that end. When we organically actually experience that. It's life-changing. Theosophy teaches be the change. Now, this is interesting, how I said earlier, it does rub off, the surprises we see. Kevin MacLeod, who has this program, Grand Design. I love it. I love watching it. I'm sort of
so sorry, I don't have a television. We don't watch TV. I do watch YouTube once in a while, but I just don't. And Periscope.
He's wonderful. Kevin MacLeod. He looks at grand designing, renovating, building.
Oh my God. Yeah, I bet you my husband might know about him. Yeah, I think so.
Yes, and I think you would enjoy him too, now that you're on this big renovation project. And he said, I overheard him last week saying this, we create community, because it was a project where everybody self-built into a community, all different people coming together. And he ended that program by saying, we create community. Now, this is true Theosophy. We create community not by bringing together people of like mind, but by bringing together people of different minds. And by deep listening and tolerance, co-create unity in diversity, and thus create community. Now, isn't that brilliant?
Very well said. Yes. Thank you, Kevin MacLeod. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Theosophy is the wisdom underlying all religions, including our First Nation people. And I find this so interesting that, it's that dot within a circle, and that is the primary teaching and the secret doctrine, ancient wisdom.
It is ancient, archaic, it belongs to all and solely to none. No one owns it, no one created it. It's been here since the beginning of time.
And I wish Indigenous cultures, our own First Nation people, we took more interest in their spirituality, actually, because we look to India, we look to South America, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Chinese, Taoism, etc. But there's something, I think, in our own Australian First Nation people that deserves exploring further.
Yeah, I agree.
And Theosophy texts are aids to the creative imagination, fusing metaphysics and ethics, arousing spiritual, and I like that word, arousing spiritual intuition and awakening soul memory. It's about awakening because nothing is new. Gupta Vidya is the hidden golden thread behind Philosophia Perennis, the accumulated wisdom of the ages.
Mm.
When all religions are stripped of their accretions and superstitions, what remains is the core of Theosophy.
Mm-hmm.
It is a philosophy which renders life intelligible and demonstrates that justice and love guide the cosmos. Its teachings contribute. I mean, when you really think about justice and love, people say, oh, yes, sure, yeah. But when you look at the law of karma, it is one of justice, of retribution, of balance.
Balance and equilibrium.
Restoring balance. And if you think about what love is, I mean, love is so misused in this world, that word. We say it so glibly. But if we meditate on it, really contemplate on it, maybe for a week or two, or maybe months or longer, and tease it out, what is it really? So its teachings contribute to the organic, I like the word organic, unfolding of the latent spiritual nature in the human being, without dependence, without fear, and without doctrine. Mm. And in conclusion, therefore, here's a final checklist. And again, here's Michael Lernick. He writes some wonderful little musings from the inner duck, and the inner duck is his inner little soul.
That's sweet.
Is let it go, let it out, let it all unravel, let it free, and it can be a path on which to travel. Mm. And, yoga chitta vritti narodaha, catching that head of ours, those thoughts. Mm. And the essence is really study, contemplation, self-transformation, application in service of humanity. And once we've done that, more study, contemplation, self-transformation, application in service of humanity. And I guess it's a lifelong process. And the core and the essence on the final end of it all is to know how to pour someone a cup of tea. Oh, and make them smile.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
So the final reminder for the traveler is bicycle wisdom, bee wisdom, turtle wisdom, which means, growth happens at its own pace. So when a turtle hatches from its egg and has the big beach to cross to get to the water, if you pick it up and put it in the water, it's not going to have built the strength in its little legs to actually survive and swim for its life. It's only a finger. It's only a finger, pointing towards the truth. It's your thoughts. It's our thoughts. Mm-hmm. We're all in this together. When confused, stop a while, pitch your tent, stargaze, and breathe. And the final thought in this traverse tale is, any man who can hitch the length and breadth of the galaxy, rough it, slum it, struggle against terrible odds, win through and still know where his towel is clearly a man to be reckoned with.
So 42.
Words of wisdom by Douglas Adam, the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Mm. And it's so true, because it is one of those journeys, but we do need to come back to earth. Mm-hmm. And we do need to find our towel, and we do need to live.
Yeah. Those are very good words too. When things get confusing, just stop for a moment. You don't have to keep... you're a human as well. If you're on this path, you may be on this path. Yeah, there you go. Pitch your tent, stargaze, and breathe. You can still walk the path and still be who you are, but you are also human, and you are not expected to be perfect.
No,
by no means. But you can continue when you catch your breath, and you can overcome yourself through selfless application. You can.
And stargazing, truly, if you look at the night sky, I mean, it puts our life into perspective, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. And how?
And here, my little Theosophy extras, a bibliography, tease for those keen with thought-provoking fiction for a rainy day towards the end as well. So this is a Theosophy Bookshelf. Just in general, I gathered a few books that I thought were a great, collection of things that might be useful at different stages. And for newcomers, I have put together Theosophy Essentials, and I think definitely what drew me in after that first study meeting that I happened to come into, where they studied the microcosm and the macrocosm kind of thing, was I wanted to know who Helena Blavatsky was. And I took out this book by Sylvia Cranston, The Extraordinary Life and Influence of Helena Blavatsky. And I read it from cover to cover, which I rarely do because I open books and read whatever happens on that page. But I read it from cover to cover and I couldn't put it down. It just read like a travelogue of the most amazing story of her life, her influence for the New Age, and the New Age doesn't acknowledge it. It's like a master thesis, is a doctoral thesis on Helena Blavatsky. I recommend it for anybody who's interested in who she is, what she initiated, and what she actually did in a time when, there was no Google, there was no computers, there was no air travel. She did it all on foot or by boat, laborious. And the other thing, the key to Theosophy which explains a lot of what is in the secret doctrine, and I'd say a must for anybody who's wanting to go deeper into what Theosophy actually is. Mm-hmm. So that's for beginners. For the super keen traveller, I'd say Meditation, a practical guide, study guide by Adelaide Gardner. And then the two books of the stanzas of Jian, but particularly as a first, I'd say Foundations of Esoteric Philosophy by Ianthe Hoskins that I quoted from before, where the Bowen notes are and where HPB suggested how to best study the secret doctrine and her warnings about what not to do. And then extra study add-ons is The Science of Yoga by Taimani. But I do love the Yoga Sutras. I think they're a must for anybody who's really wanting to get to grips with the mind, the disturbances of the mind. And then two books by Krishnamurti, Commentaries on Living a Mind Without Measure, I think. And I think that's important because our mind does measure everything.
Yes, it does.
Time, by judgment, by comparison, and so on. And finally, for a rainy day, I just thought I'd include that because reading Watership down was just so profound a study, and because it's written from a furry friend perspective of us as humans.
Oh, that's wonderful. And also with the allegory of Plato's cave in there, I know it's been around, it's been hovering in my high school readings. I just have not read it cover to cover, but I certainly will now. And also, I would like to put links to these books in the video. So if I can ask that if you know of any, I have the key to Theosophy and things like that, but if you have any links, please send them along and I shall include them for everyone.
Yeah, so I would really leave it at that, but this was just a little play thing because a fun thing. Life has to be fun. Sometimes, we need to read something that's a bit different. And of course, Tuesday Lobsam Ramsar, also known as Cyril Hoskins, the Plymouth plumber that I mentioned earlier, Tibetologist who wrote Doctor from Lhasa. I really actually liked. I don't know about the third eye, I didn't read it, but he was actually endorsed by the Dalai Lama for bringing Tibet to the attention of the world. Isn't that amazing?
That's wonderful. When you say Plymouth plumber, are you talking about Plymouth, England, or the United States?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
He's passed on, but he damaged his back or something, I can't remember, as a plumber, and then somehow got interested in Tibet and spiritual things and journeys and that, and I really liked what he wrote.
Plymouth is just a stone's throw away, just maybe 30-minute drive from here.
Is that
I
right?
mean, it's a huge part of our lives. Yes. So is plumbing. So it's interesting. So thank you.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that's just my stuff of the 70s.
Ah, thank you, sweetheart. Thank you so, so, so much. We are far more than our five senses, and we are all connected. There is a much bigger picture. Theosophy going from the cosmos, the origin of the universe, to the origin of man, to mineral, plant, animal, you name it, the angels, the dream world, the astral world. It's all here inside Theosophy. Esther, I cannot thank you enough. What a beautiful gift you are, and how you help to cross-pollinate these teachings all over the world. I hope that your travels bring you to England. It would be lovely to have you here when our Airbnb, if our Airbnb is ever fixed up so we have a place to put you. Otherwise it's, well, because we only have one room is finished. But it is quite a journey, and you are such a gift. It has been so wonderful to have you here as our guest. Thank you for spending extra time with us today to flesh out all of this information that you so lovingly prepared. And there will be links down below to get a hold of Esther and these, as far as what she's been talking about, the books, the text, the quotes, all of it. So thank you for being a part of Living Theosophy, sweetheart. You are a perfect example of what living Theosophy truly is.